to that National Press Club?
Yeah, the National Press Club event 13 years ago, and the things we've done since were really an accident of a situation. Not an accident. It was required of a situation that was so dysfunctional that there was no other way out. So, okay, I'm a doctor working as an emergency guy, and I'm shuttling up here to DC and New York, meeting with the CIA director and this person and this member of the Senate Intelligence Committee with Project Starlight, which was the predecessor name, although it was kept very quiet before the Disclosure Project. And I'm in my mid-30s. In my naivete, I thought we had a constitution and a democracy, and I thought a lot of things that were really nice lessons from your high school civics class, but are just nonsense. So when I learned that the president and the CIA director had made inquiries into this issue and had been denied any information, when I first got the letter from my point of contact to the CIA director, which I have right here, it was described to me, and I was told I would be the first person to brief the administration, the Clinton administration, and this CIA director on this subject. Now, my wife and I laughed. I mean, I'm this 35-year-old doctor, or 30, I don't know, at that point, running an emergency department. I'm going, oh, this is absurd. It cannot be. So then what happens is that I come up here and I have the meeting, and there was no prevarication. It was completely true. And so then I go over and I meet with members of Congress. So I meet with people on intel, appropriations, what have you. Same story. And they were not lying. And the pièce de résistance is probably 1997, so 4 years later, and I'm briefing the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. All right, this is the guy who he's J2 for Joint Staff, head of intelligence, admiral. And it's a stand-up briefing at the Pentagon, and I go in there with my military advisor, a few disclosure witnesses that had not come public yet, and a man who walked on the moon, Edgar Mitchell, 6 men walk on the moon, and who was learning about all this. And so I invited him to come along. And I'm there with this admiral, and before I had gone to that, I had sent a document. And it's on our website. It's the NRO document, National Reconnaissance Office document, secret document that I acquired. And I'd sent that ahead of time before I got there. And it had all the project code names and numbers and what have you. You can look at it. It's on our website for anyone to look at if you can read. None of this is secret. But he knew how to read a document. And so he contacted one of the compartments. And he was told, he told them, I want to be read into or briefed on this project. And they said, well, Admiral, we know who you are, but you don't have a need to know. Let me repeat, the head of intelligence, Joint Chiefs of Staff of the largest military in the world at the Pentagon. I was there. Now, at this point, he's so mad. He says, well, God damn it, if I don't have a need to know, who does? And they said, sir, we cannot discuss this with you, and basically hung up on him. It was a corporate contractor. So by the time I get to this meeting, he is frightened and furious. And so I do a meeting. It was supposed to be a 45-minute stand-up briefing. It goes on for a couple hours. And he keeps canceling appointments downstream. And at the end of it, I said, we really need your help fixing this problem. It's a huge constitutional crisis. He says, what am I supposed to do? He says, you're telling me you briefed the CIA director and gotten stuff with the Rockefellers to the president. They are being sidelined. And not only that, but that there are technologies that we've developed that are anti-gravity that have been functioning since the 50s and 60s that can do circles around the best thing I have that I know about, which is a B-2 stealth bomber. I said, yes, sir, that's all true. He says, and then what can I do? It's point, set, match. He says, good luck, but he turned to me and he said, as far as I'm concerned, the people running this are a criminal, rogue enterprise, and you have my permission to disclose everything you have and any source you have. And I have been told that by many, many senior people. And when people say, who red-lighted or green-lighted the disclosure project, I said, it'd make you very surprised. This is going to hit the internet. But the head of Intelligence Joint Staff, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, members of the Senate, because they're all going, we should know, but we don't. I bring in dispositive documents, testimony, evidence, whatever it is. They make an inquiry based on that actionable intelligence, and they're told nothing. That is proof of an illegal, rogue component within not our country, but multiple countries. So once we proved that, in 1998, I wrote a UNOD letter. Now what is that? Unless otherwise directed. Now I learned this from my military folks I'm not ever been in the military or government. And they said, here's how you do this. The way we do something when it's controversial, we send in a letter, and it's called a UNOD letter, unless otherwise directed. And we basically said, this is our assessment, and here's what we're going to do unless otherwise directed. But they don't have to reply unless otherwise directed. So we did that. In late 1990, I believe it was in 98, we sent this letter, went to the head of every agency, FBI, Department of Justice, CIA, you name it. Return receipt requested, we can prove that these went to these entities. And I said that unless otherwise directed, we're going to start disclosing the testimony of people who have top secret security clearances and oaths, as well as documents, and we were exempt from the National Security Act for prosecution, and that this is a legal action because the operation keeping this secret is illegal, rogue, a priori, is not protected under the Constitution or the rule of law. No one to this day has contested that letter in 2014. Based on that, from 98 to 2000, we put together the Disclosure Project, and the rest is history. So this is very different than, say, what Edward Snowden did. Snowden was disclosing information of this program PRISM that did have oversight from the president and the oversight committees, even though there were members of the Senate oversight committees who were appalled and shocked by it, and still are. But there was still oversight. So even though that's a black project, it was a legally overseen black project. So let me make a distinction between that and what I'm talking about. I'm talking about unacknowledged special access projects that are illegal and rogue and unconstitutional, and as such have no protection from any law that Congress has passed and a president has signed. Now that we can prove, and if someone wants to take me to court, I'm ready to go, because boy, we can prove it. And the subpoenas that would fly to the top people that we have briefed in the Congress, at the Pentagon, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, whom I personally briefed, this head of Intelligence Joint Staff, CIA directors, they'd all be called to swear under oath. And they would have to say, yep, and we didn't know a thing. So at a certain point, there's no way around that. So we did that due diligence between 1993 and 1998. That 5-year period was all the backstory that led to us saying, we're just going to go forward now. Not without risk and not without some people furious that we were doing it. I mean, furious. And who are still furious that we're doing it. But it was a correct thing to do. It was a patriotic thing to do. And also, the right thing to do from the point of view of even the legalities. Because you cannot claim protection under national security or secrecy oaths while at the same time breaking the law and lying to the head of intelligence for the Joint Staff, or lying to the president, or lying to the CIA director, or lying to members of the Senate Intelligence Committee who are supposed to be overseeing these kind of operations. You can't have it both ways. But that's how they wanted it for 50 years. They wanted it both ways. And that's what Eisenhower learned the very, very, very hard way between 1954 and 1961 when he left office, is that he actually got outmaneuvered by the military and the intelligence and corporate complex, and he totally lost control over these operations. He knew about them, and he was very interested in all of this, but he lost control. And no president since then has had operational access control. Now, Let me make a distinction between knowledge of something and control of it. I've given documents like this to people who then have gotten a certain level of access and been briefed on parts of all this information. But when they try to assert any control over it, basically it's like the admiral, they get hung up on the phone, And that is an enormous problem for our country and other countries like the United Kingdom and France, Australia. And it's something that is a real threat to democracy and to the notion of what we think we live in. And so one of the myths that the public suffers under is that we live under an intact constitutional republic and democracy. The other myth is that we have a free press. I was at this meeting I mentioned with all these 120 elites and world leaders around the world. One of them was a publisher of a major paper that I can't name. And this issue came up because everyone who asked, who's kind of a mid-level journalist for the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or CNN will say, oh, if any of this were true, it would be in the news. I go, really? This guy said, oh yeah. He says, I would be awakened in the wee hours of the morning or whenever as the publisher, owner and publisher of this big paper. And they would say, have so-and-so pull that story. And they would pull it. And on our website, there is a document from the CIA from 1991 that describes this policy that the CIA has, even domestically, to embed people in these various large media outfits to change, alter, stop stories that they didn't want to get out. Now, John Q. Public, going to their high school and college civics lessons, thinks we have a free press. There's another big myth. The other huge myth is that Adam Smith is alive and well, and we have a free market economy. Nonsense. We have a managed market economy. What do I mean? You can't have a free market economy if the biggest technological breakthroughs for the most important sector of the economy is being ruthlessly suppressed and is being held down through the national security state. On our website, there is a document from 3.5 years ago from the Federation of American Scientists that states there are 5,135 patents that have been seized under the National Security Act that have been sequestered. And it even talks about one that was in 1971, a highly efficient, for back then, more than 20%, maybe it was 50%, efficient photovoltaic generator, meaning sunlight going straight to electricity in a generator, that was seized under the national security provisions. Well, this is not a nuclear trigger or a weapon. It was something that would have competed with the price point of coal and gas. And so who are these bureaucrats working for? Now, do you think the president in the Oval Office knew of that action when it happened? No. Or any member of Congress? No. So you have this permanent bureaucracy that will do these things at the behest of those who are with an all-access badge. And they're not going to say no. So they just go and seize it. Now, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's a mainstream scientific organization that did a study of these seized and sequestered patents. But the patent is only a fraction of it. The man I told you about who did this trans-dimensional technologies effort in '74, he didn't even try to go to patent. He never got that far. They found out what he was working on and showed up with a national security order, just like Stan Meyer's toroidal free energy device, before there was ever an attempt to patent it. So on top of the 5,165 patents seized, there's probably several times that number that have been intercepted prior to it even going to patent. So how then can you convince me that we live in a free market economy when the most important part of our economy and everything we use, from transportation to lights to whatever, has all been managed and controlled by people who have special interests? So this is like your giant, people talk about Washington and special interests, but this is it to the nth degree. So that's sort of how we ended up coming around to this, because we realized that the future of the planet and our democracy were really being jeopardized, and that we were on the right side of the law. Now, if I had jumped straight from identifying people who knew this and documents and testimony, but had not offered it to the president and to these oversight committees and to these agencies, then I would have been guilty of doing something potentially illegal. And that's why I was actually very careful. I was very much dotting my I's and crossing my T's, because my advisor said, you've got a tiger by the tail, you better be very careful with this, which we were. I mean, it was a very big effort that nobody knows about, well, till now, people see this, but that's how we did it, why we did it. We had to be careful. But now at this point, I said, that toothpaste has been squeezed out of the tube, and notwithstanding the corruption that happens between the intelligence community and the big corporate media with the internet, when we launched the National Press Club event, somewhere upwards of 800 million people heard about it. So it's very, very, very difficult. And if you look at it, more than half the population believe UFOs are real, and part of the government's hiding part of it. Now, they don't know the details, but more than half, more than who voted for any president in our lifetime. And 43% of Americans now think that we are currently being visited by advanced civilization. Very big number in a poll that came out last year. So I tell people, we really, from that point of view, but in terms of the conventional wisdom of the hidebound elites, the inbred hidebound elites that are running the corporate media and academia and big government, that is the conventional wisdom there is that, oh, pshaw, this can't be true, because if it were true, I would know about it. That's what I hear over and over and over again. There's a certain hubris, because I have a lot of family that are tied into the Ivy League schools and the elite institutions. And the mindset is, if this were true, I would know about it. And yet I have a sister-in-law who had been at one point the editor of the Boston Globe. And when I was first getting involved with this, she says, I don't care if you put a dead ET on my desk, the Boston Globe will never run a story about this, because that's the domain of the tabloids and silly season, and we're a blue chip paper in Boston. And this is a family member, because of the ridicule. And the thing that most people don't understand, and I was told this by an Air Force major years ago, most of the secrecy at this point isn't maintained by any kind of cloak and dagger threats. It's because the subject is so ridiculous. It has been portrayed as the domain of the kooks and the tinfoil hat people, and the sky is falling, and I've been abducted to another planet, and what have you, that people who are, quote, respectable in academia, government, the media, don't want any association with it. Where did that start? I have a document that I got after I briefed the CIA director, and it has a stamp date 1994 when it was finally released, and it was a document from 1953, okay, 61 years ago, where the CIA is talking about using psychological warfare on the UFO subject, and, I'm quoting, engaging Disney Studios to make cartoons about the subject, so it would be trivialized and made ridiculous. Yeah, I have this document. I mean, this is a dispositive. It came from the agency to me. So with the provenance that goes with that. So we have now 61 years of a very well orchestrated counterintelligence defaming of the subject campaign. So when I started trying to do this, 20 years ago, it wasn't like we were starting at ground level trying to go up Mount Everest. We were starting at 20,000 leagues under the sea trying to go up Mount Everest, really, honestly. And that's why it's been such a heavy lift. I mean, very difficult. Hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Because it's not a level playing field. And I can sit with people who are major, but they'll say, oh no, we can outrun with this. Now, many people say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. I go, really? Well, it's not. It's not a theory. And it's not a conspiracy. It's just the way the world works. And so disclosure happened because no one else would do it. Honestly, I never thought I would get involved with that. What I really wanted to do was bring the concepts of higher consciousness, transdimensional physics and communication systems to set up ambassadors around the world to make contact, bypassing the sort of dysfunction of the UN, State Department, governmental thing as an NGO non-governmental organization doing that. And actually, because we were so successful so quickly, you know, in 1992, we're there on the beach in Florida, and 4 ET craft materialized right in front of everyone, 50 people, including 2 colonels and Air Force pilots. It was on the front page of the Pensacola paper that day. The video we have is, I don't operate cameras, but there was a guy who had an old Hi-8, you know, the old Hi-8 camera. So it was not very good, but you can hear him going, "Holy damn!" You know, you probably have seen the film footage. And that's when, after that, the former head of Army Intelligence, who'd been pulled into the corporate world, and a bunch of other people pulled me aside and overtly first tried to buy me off and then threatened me. And it's never stopped since. And when I refused to be bought off, they started a defamation of my character campaign, to the point that I'm working in this ER up to my, you know, eyebrows and blood and brains and everything, and they put out a thing on the internet that I'm actually not a doctor and don't have a medical degree. So I'm having to fax all over the media and everywhere my medical degree and my license. That really happened to me. And it hasn't ended since. It's been 22 years of that kind of psychological warfare. But, you know, I just, in a way, I'm used to it now. You know, nothing surprises me that these clowns would put out there. But at the same time, it really gets hard to take just because you get so irritated. You know, it's like, really? And the public is so gullible, they don't know what to believe. So it's really hard. I mean, it's very, very hard because, you know, you're going against a very big headwind. And the inventors have run into the same thing, you know, because they'll be ridiculed and laughed off the stage, and they'll have people who will appear before them who have, these are legitimate people, who will then just say, "Pshaw, you're violating the second law of thermodynamics." No, you're not. You know why? Because there's complete conservation of energy. It's just that what's not being accounted for is the majority of energy in the cosmos. You're not factoring into your equation. So there's complete conservation of energy. You're just pulling it out of this other field of 0 point and quantum vacuum. So when people tell you that these technologies can't be done because it's violating any of these fundamental laws of physics, it's absolutely not true. But that's the argument. In fact, there was a man from MIT at this elite gathering I was at a few months ago who was telling everyone, "Oh no, you can't do that because you're violating the laws of thermodynamics." I'm saying, no, not any more than water falling over the Hoover Dam, turning a generator, is violating it. It's using the force of water, which is really gravity. Gravity, you're turning gravity into electricity. That's all a hydroelectric dam is. Think about it. It's the mass of water being pulled down because of gravity, gravitational fields, turning a generator. That's all it is. So is that violating the second law of thermodynamics? No. You're using a gravitational field. People don't think about these elemental aspects and think deeply.